The work that Patrick and Marcus have presented just kind of sets the place for what I'm going to present here. And it has to do with the fact that as temperatures are rising, and these are kind of the summary of what we're expecting in San Mateo County, temperatures are rising, sea level is rising, rainfall is also increasing. And with that increasing rainfall, we're seeing more runoff. And so our work is trying to figure out what does that mean for flooding. And the approach that we've gone about to try to understand that is to look at, to develop a model using a RAS model, which some of you may be familiar with. I'm not going to go into the specifics of that, but the basic idea is for every cell, which is about the size of this room in the county, we move water from the space from which the rain falls and move it along through the river systems out to the ocean outlet. And when we get to the ocean outlet, we go to Patrick's and his group, and they tell us what it is that the water levels at the coast are supposed to be. And so for this modeling exercise, we picked up some key outlets for key creeks, and used that to set the boundary condition in our flood models. And we modeled two kinds of storms. A minor storm, we called one, that we expect to see once every about 20 years, and a major storm, the kind that you'd expect to see once every 100 years. And our model essentially uses the boundary condition that we've talked about, which includes the sea level, and in combination with the rainfall coming off of the land surface. And just to give you a sense of what the flood models look like, here's what existing flood models look like. The ones on the left are the FEMA 100-year flood models in that purple, I think so. And on the right there, and those are based entirely on historical data. Nothing about what's coming, what the future looks like. And then the maps on the right are the kinds of maps that we're getting out of the sea level rise and coastal modeling efforts. And those tell us what's happening in the future, but they don't tell us what's happening from rainfall. They are driven by salt water coming in. And so our efforts are to try to explain what happens when rainfall hits the land surface and eventually makes its way down to the ocean interface. And here are some of the results that we have. On the left, a minor flood under 2030 climate conditions, and a major storm on the right for under 2030 conditions. Again, some of the changes begin to be obvious, and notice that there's flooding on the coastal, at the interface of the bay, and to some extent also on the ocean side. And this is all fresh water. This is not salt water moving in, this is fresh water coming from rain, moving and hitting the coastal interface. And we have similar results under 2070 and for the minor and major storm. So it helps to kind of solidify the idea that you need to pay attention to what's happening from rainfall as well as what's coming from the ocean side, the sea level rise. This table just kind of summarizes some of the data that we see over the flooding regions under the different storm types. And the main feature that I want to point out is the fact that, and these percentages are the percentage of the county area, how much of the county is falling under the different categories. The key thing that I want to point out is that if you look in the middle two columns, they're pretty similar, the numbers are pretty similar, which says that the kinds of effect that we would see under a major storm in 2030, by 2070 we see it under a minor storm. So you have an intensification of the type of flooding impacts. And we want to show you just a few areas. I think Jasmeet was a bit concerned that we not raise any alarms here. And so these are all preliminary. And for all the flood maps, just go back, the low risk area, medium and high risk, as you get progressively darker, there's a higher risk involved there. And these are south coast images, kind of around Redwood Shores, and Redwood Shores Lagoon up in the area there, and then Redwood City kind of towards the bottom. And so this is a minor flood, the minor storm and 2030 conditions getting worse as you go into the major storm. Again, under 2030 conditions, you start to see flooding around some of the streets, El Camino, between El Camino and 101, and then the minor storm and 2070 conditions going into the major storm. And by that time, the flooding at the interface is starting to get a whole lot worse. And it's just an illustration of the types of impacts that you see. COLMA Creek, we've talked about a little bit, and all the efforts that are going on, and this is in no way to this is just trying to encourage more of these types of efforts to address these. And so this is the minor storm. Again, flooding is already kind of a risk in some areas. With a major storm under 2030, some of those areas of flooding intensify. And when we move on to 2070, you see the area at the bottom right of the picture where, again, fresh water is starting to accumulate close to the bay interface, largely because of, as the sea level rises, it's more difficult for the water to get out. And that intensifies as you go into 2070, the major storm. And we looked around the Pescadero area as well. Again, this area is actually, there's a lot more going on than we could quickly explain, but basic issue is that the marshes do get flooded with minor flooding under 2030. The flooding does intensify under the major storm. But when you start to get into the minor and the major flooding storms for 2070, again, it starts to get a little bit more complicated because water actually starts to redistribute within the marsh itself, and parts of the area that are closer to the mouth begin to gather more water, but actually end up draining some water from other parts of the basin. So again, that effect intensified. There's much more water accumulated within the marsh area, closer towards the mouth. So interesting effects, a lot to be studied with these results, and these are just to give you an indication of the kinds of results that's coming out of this modeling effort. These are planning level data. Again, I just need to move, but still preliminary. And I think that the county is looking through these data, trying to satisfy itself that they fully understand what's going on, and then eventually it'll find its way through to the local level, to the cities, and eventually into open portals. But some of the interesting things that we're seeing is that we showed you some of those results. It gives a standardized framework that you can look at overall flood risk within the county, pick up the hot spots, places that you need to study more intensely, and issues that you need to address. Just to again summarize those findings, as we're projected to get more rain as the climate gets warmer, which leads to more flooding, particularly in the larger creeks, at the interface between the creeks and the shore. We kind of need to plan the protection of both of those in an integrated fashion. And so that's pretty much How did I do on time?